In war, the nation with the most ships, the most planes, and the most industrial might is supposed to win. But in the spring of 1942, this law of warfare was broken. The Imperial Japanese Navy, fresh from its triumph at Pearl Harbor, was conducting a masterclass in naval supremacy. They were everywhere. They were winning everywhere. And American morale was collapsing. Now, let's access the field logs and analyze the true nature of this story. The situation was dire. 6 months after the Pearl Harbor attack, the Pacific Ocean was a map of Allied disasters. The Philippines had fallen. Singapore, the vaunted Gibraltar of the East, was gone. The Japanese combined fleet, the Kido Butai, operated with terrifying, unchecked impunity. This wasn't just a string of defeats, it was a fundamental strategic crisis. The American carriers, though miraculously spared at Pearl Harbor, were outnumbered and outgunned. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant architect of that infamous attack, was already planning his next move. A move to end the war. He intended to lure the remaining U.S. carriers into a single, decisive battle. A battle he and the world expected him to win. The symbolic Doolittle raid in April had only hardened this resolve, stinging Japanese pride and accelerating Yamamoto's timetable. His objective was simple:
Time was short,
force a final, annihilating engagement
responded.
before American industrial power could truly awaken. But to coordinate this grand, ocean-spanning trap, Yamamoto had to communicate with his vast, scattered fleet. And in Washington, and more importantly in a damp basement in Hawaii, a small, overlooked unit was listening. They were searching for a single whisper in a global storm of radio static. They were hunting a ghost. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the new commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, was a man beset by uncertainty. His forces were weak. His intelligence was fragmented. His advisors were divided. The entire defense of the Pacific, from Hawaii to Australia, rested on finding an answer to that single question. Every available task force, every admiral, every precious ship was waiting. They were waiting for an enemy they could not find, to strike a blow they could not possibly predict. The answer came from a dungeon. Not a literal one, but a windowless, poorly ventilated basement in Pearl Harbor. This was Station Hypo, the Combat Intelligence Unit. It was led by a brilliant, eccentric, and insubordinate officer, Commander Joseph Rochefort. While Washington's naval intelligence focused on bureaucracy, Rochefort's team focused on one thing: the enemy's mind. They were tasked with breaking the Imperial Japanese Navy's primary operational code, JN-25. It was a super-enciphered code, a nightmarish, multi-layered system of numbers and codebooks. By spring 1942, Rochefort's team could only read fragments, perhaps 10 to 15%. But in war, a 10% glimpse can be everything, if it's the right 10%. Then, a pattern emerged. In the endless streams of encrypted traffic, one two-letter designator appeared again and again: AF. Japanese communications repeatedly referenced AF as the primary objective of a massive, impending fleet operation. Rochefort and his team developed a hypothesis, a conviction built from fragments and intuition. They believed AF was a tiny, strategically vital atoll, Midway Island. When Rochefort presented this finding, he was met with dangerous skepticism. Washington's intelligence unit, OP-20G, was furious. They were convinced AF was in the Aleutians, or perhaps even Oahu itself. High Command was paralyzed. A guess in either direction would be fatal. Nimitz was now at a crossroads. This was not just a tactical decision, it was a test of faith. He had to choose between the official consensus view from Washington and the radical, unproven claims of Rochefort's basement-dwelling codebreakers. When we analyze this moment, we see the true measure of Admiral Nimitz. He chose to trust the outliers, the men who, like him, were closest to the fight. But trust required proof, and to get proof they laid a perfect, simple trap. If AF was Midway, as Rochefort insisted, it would have specific vulnerabilities. Acting on Rochefort's suggestion, Nimitz had the Midway garrison send out an unencrypted, plain-text radio message. Midway's freshwater condenser is broken. It was bait, cast into the ether, designed to be intercepted by Japanese listening posts. The men at Station HYPO held their breath. The entire American war effort in the Pacific waited. 2 days later, a new Japanese intercept was pulled from the static. A high-priority message sent from a regional command to Admiral Yamamoto's staff. The decrypted fragment was electrifying. AF is short on water. Rochefort had been right. The gamble had paid off. The target was Midway. The date, gleaned from other intercepts, was the first week of June. Nimitz now possessed the single most valuable commodity in warfare: the enemy's plan. He knew where Yamamoto was going, and he knew when. The time for listening was over. The time for ambush had begun. The trap was set. Admiral Nimitz, armed with Rochefort's priceless data, did the unthinkable. He stripped Pearl Harbor of its defenses, dispatching every available carrier. He positioned his fleet, Task Force 16 and 17, at a precise location northeast of Midway, a location codenamed Point Luck, where they could wait, unseen, on the enemy's flank. On June 4th, 1942, the battle began exactly as the intercepts had predicted. Admiral Nagumo's Kido Butai, the four-carrier strike force, launched its attack on Midway Island. American torpedo bombers flying from Midway and the carriers found the Japanese fleet first. They flew to their deaths in waves of doomed, heroic sacrifice. They scored no hits, but they achieved something critically, tactically important. They pulled Nagumo's combat air patrol down to sea level, leaving the skies above the carriers fatally exposed. And then, the sky fell. At 10:20 a.m., American dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, arrived. They were low on fuel, lost, and nearly at the point of no return. But McCluskey, acting on the core intelligence that placed the enemy in this exact patch of ocean, spotted a lone Japanese destroyer. He made a command decision, followed it, and was led directly to Nagumo's fleet. He made a command decision, followed it, and was led directly to Nagumo's fleet. What they found was a scene of perfect, terrible vulnerability. The exact moment of maximum chaos Rochefort's intelligence had allowed them to intercept. The Japanese carriers, Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu, were in the process of rearming. Their decks were crowded with fully fueled planes, high-explosive bombs, and unsecured torpedoes. They were, in effect, floating powder kegs. It took only 5 minutes. The American bombs tore through the wooden flight decks. The chain reactions were instantaneous and apocalyptic. In the span of a single coffee break, 3 of Japan's finest fleet carriers were transformed into burning, sinking infernos. The fourth, the Hiryu, was found and destroyed just a few hours later. The Kido Butai had ceased to exist. The codebreakers in their basement had delivered the killing blow, using American carriers as their precision weapon. The battle was over. The smoke had cleared from the ocean, but the consequences were just beginning to unfold across the globe. Admiral Yamamoto's grand plan for a decisive battle had, in fact, succeeded. It was simply decisive for the other side. In the span of a single afternoon, the Imperial Japanese Navy lost its 4 finest fleet carriers, a heavy cruiser, and over 2,500 personnel. But the ships were not the true loss. The real, unrecoverable blow was human. Japan lost over 100 of its most elite combat-hardened carrier pilots. These were the men who had trained for years, the veterans of Pearl Harbor, the Coral Sea, and the Indian Ocean. They were the irreplaceable heart of Japanese naval aviation, and in 5 minutes, that heart was torn out. Japan's industrial base could, given time, replace the carriers. It could never replace that generation of veteran airmen. The victory at Midway was not a victory of steel, but of information. It was a triumph of the mind over industrial might. When we analyze the larger war, Midway is the fulcrum. It represents the high watermark of Japanese expansion in the Pacific. After this battle, the strategic initiative passed permanently to the Allies. The war was changed forever. It was won because a small team of cryptographers refused to yield to an unbreakable code. It was won because one commander, Joseph Rochefort, trusted his intuition. And it was won because a senior admiral, Chester Nimitz, chose to risk his entire fleet on their intelligence. Midway forever changed the nature of command, proving that strategic insight could be more powerful than strategic reserves. It was the first and perhaps most decisive naval battle won by code breakers. It validated the silent, unseen war of signals intelligence, elevating it from a curious sideshow to the single most critical element of modern warfare, a legacy that defines every conflict to this day. History is often seen as a chain of inevitable events, a line of steel and fire marching toward a known outcome. But as the whispers of AF remind us, the entire weight of that chain can rest on a single fragile link. A decrypted message, a moment of profound trust, a flash of human insight. The greatest battles are not always fought on the field, but in the unseen spaces between the lines. In the quiet, decisive theater of the human mind.